Welcome to Everyone Loves Guitar, where we get to sit down and talk with interesting professional guitar players and related music industry experts. If you love playing guitar, stick around. You're in the right place. Hey everybody, this is Craig Garber from Everyone Loves Guitar. We have a really cool guest today, and it's actually someone that's right across the bay. I'm in Tampa, and I'm with Tracy Hoeft from Clearwater, who owns Michael Kelly Guitars, and he's a really sharp guy as a business person, as a guitar manufacturer. They sell beautiful guitars, and I'm excited to learn a lot more about them. So Tracy, I really appreciate your time. Thanks for joining us today.
Well, thank you, Craig. Appreciate you having me. Looking forward to it.
Well, cool. Let's talk a little bit about your company first for the people that may not be familiar with you. I know you guys have been making guitars since 1999.
Yep.
But can you give us like an overview of what Michael Kelly does specifically and who your primary customers are?
Absolutely, yeah. We're at this point, we're a full selection guitar brand. So we've got acoustic guitars, electric guitars, mandolins, basses. We sell globally, and we pride ourselves on having what we would call a boutique sensibility. So while we do have production model, quantities, and we do have some really great price points, we take our cues and we have our inspiration is more of a thought process like you'd see in the smaller builders around North America and Europe, as opposed to trying to follow what the big guys do in big quantities and low prices. And so, we're really a guitar brand that wants to be able to provide to players something unique, something that doesn't look like everybody else in their neighborhood has.
Yes, well, I tell you, your guitars are beautiful, and I was shocked. I initially thought they were all hand-built custom guitars. I was shocked to find out that they are production line guitars, because you don't usually see, the attention to detail, the quality of the workmanship, and just the patina, the way, the aesthetics are really nice.
Well, thank you.
So let's talk about, you've got, I guess, 5 product lines, it looks like, based on your website, which is actually a very cool website, too. You put a lot of effort into that. So it looks like you got the 1950s, the 1960s, the Hybrid, the Patriot, and the Rick Turner, and then you have all of those for lefties.
Yep.
Can you just maybe walk us through the Cliff Notes version of each of those lines?
Absolutely, yeah. We use our naming convention, our series convention, if you will, to kind of start with a platform, and then within those platforms we have different takes on each instrument. But the 50s would be, your traditional single cutaway. People might call them T-style. I can't say the manufacturing name that others
can't
might
say
know.
The T word.
But we don't want to have the Fender lawyers on the phone with us. But anyway, so it's a T-style single cut flat bolt-on. And the 60s model is more of your traditional bolt-on double cut. Mm-hmm. And the Patriot goes after, let's say, that arch top set neck LP style. Mm-hmm. And the Hybrid is an instrument that combines. It's basically a solid body electric guitar, but we worked with Fishman to get some acoustic guitar electronics added to it, so that it's a hybrid in that it can switch from acoustic to electric tone very easily and quickly, and really works well as a gigging guitar and a studio guitar. And then the Rick Turner model. Rick is a really amazing luthier in the San Francisco area, and so we got a chance to team up with him. He makes a lot of high-end handmade instruments, and we basically do production versions of some of those. And so that's our electric line, kind of the top-level view of our electric guitar line. And then in addition to those things, we have a set of acoustic guitars, a set of basses, and as you said, we do lefty versions of a lot of our most popular instruments as well.
So this is not the Rick Turner. Was that his name from Bachman Turner? That's not the same guy, is it?
It's not the same guy, right?
What was that guy's name? Fred Turner.
Fred Turner.
Yeah, okay. So how did you hook up with this guy out of San Francisco?
Just a mutual friend, and Rick was considering, going over and having some of his instruments made in a production situation in Asia, and so a friend of his said that's a lot of work and takes a whole new degree of expertise, and put us together, and we found that there was a synergy in that, because we do have that kind of boutique sensibility to what we do. We're not only looking for the product that can be the biggest seller in the world. We do look for stuff that genuinely fills a void for guitar players, so it fit.
That's really cool. That's different.
Mm-hmm.
So within each product line, I noticed you also have like mod shop and
Mm-hmm.
custom collections.
Mm-hmm.
Can you, like, what's different with those, or can you explain what those are?
Yeah, absolutely. So Mod Shop was the first kind of addition to what we were doing, and what happened there is we took some of our best-selling models, and people would ask us, to do different treatments, and doing a true custom shop is just it changes the economics of a brand tremendously. We just couldn't do it. We have to stay with something that we can do with some degree of repetitiveness, so we can do it well and do it efficiently, or else we're gonna ruin our entire value proposition for our customer. So with Mod Shop, what we did was we identified some best-selling models, came up with some ideas working with people like Lindy Fralin, Fralin Pickups,
Mm-hmm.
or Seymour Duncan, or Bare Knuckle in the UK, and TV Jones, guys like that. And we worked with them to find a new take, if you will, on a top-selling model. And of course, since it's already a top-selling model for us, we know there's a demand. We already had some consumer feedback on what other sonic options people would want. So Mod Shop really is a modded version of an existing model, but it's very defined. It's not, you could do whatever you want to. It is a model that's defined, and you get to see what the spec is and what the pickup partner is and all that kind of stuff. And it basically becomes a new model. And custom collection that you asked about was something we did at one point. We kept coming up with ideas that were models that we realized for one reason or another they may not be able to sustain for years. The first instance of that was we found some really cool woods that we wanted to do on the top of these instruments, but our source wasn't able to promise us that we'd be able to get them year after year. And so it's like, how do you do a model when you want the consumer to understand that this may go on forever if we can, but it may not. And so that was kind of the original genesis of the custom collection, was something that we identified as it's here as long as we can do it, we can do it well and get the right components. And that over the years has also morphed into some of our limited edition models where, we have a defined quantity, it's going to be done 100 pieces only, or for 1 year only, or something like that. So it really, custom collection is sort of a catch-all for anything that isn't really considered the core product line that we would assume will still be around and available to you 5 years from now.
Okay, so just so I understand, the Mod Shop is pickup and other modifications
Mm-hmm.
on existing lines of guitars you have that
That's right.
are ongoing.
Yep.
And custom collections is kind of like a limited edition in the sense that it's something different, but
Mm-hmm.
the viability it forever is questionable because of the availability of whatever particular
That's right.
wood or whatever you're using. Okay, that's very cool.
Yep.
Do the custom collections, I'm assuming there's a different sound in those?
Not necessarily. It really depends on what made them special. So, for instance, our best-selling custom collection model is our striped ebony model, and that was the wood that originally started the whole thing. And we keep finding it. Thankfully, it's like a zebra ebony. It's beautiful.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
And but it looks very different every time. So every 6 months or so, it's a different guitar in a lot of ways. When we source the next batch, it's always very different. And that's the other reason we wanted to define it that way. And then other cases, we wanted to do some models that we knew we wouldn't want to make forever, that they were, we had people asking for something, and we felt like there was a narrow group of people who might want it. So that falls into that as well.
Gotcha. So this is what I'm really interested in, because you're like an independent entrepreneurial guy. So I'm curious about this from the business aspect. Mm-hmm. Walk me through the process. How does something go from concept or, hey, I have an idea to do this, to finished product? What are the decision making? What does that process look like for you guys? I don't want you to give me any, trade
Sure.
secrets or anything, but just
Sure.
What's the process?
Well, generally speaking, at this point, the genesis of every new product really is consumer feedback. One of the things I think relatively unique about us is we're a small company. We're extremely available to our consumer. If somebody here emails a question to our site, there's basically myself and 3 other people who are going to answer it. It's the same folks who are going to be working on the design of the product, the same folks who are going to be working on quality and so forth. And so we're extremely connected, to the consumer. And that's been the case since the get-go of Michael Kelly. It's really, a DNA element of our brand. And so most everything hits the original, radar, if you will, of potentially being a new product based on some degree of consumer feedback. Or we've tried something and shared it with some consumers and gotten that feedback. And then depending on what it is, so in some cases it's a minor change, let's say a color, or wood or something like that. And that process is really getting some feedback and then, deciding when we want to launch it and things of that nature. And then there's other things that are far more complex. And as we go a little further today, we'll probably talk about some specific products that we've launched and so forth, and we can get deeper there. But, if it's something where we're changing, let's say woods or pickups or electronics for reasons of specific goals, then those things can drive the timeline and the back and forth of how many samples it takes for us to make, how much we could do in-house, how much we have to wait and do through the factory, how many CNC, what's involved in drawings and so forth. We do a lot of stuff through CNC drawings to make them accurate and replicatable. And so that, depending on how new and how different it is, those things can really add the complexity to it. And so, that is what plays into it. And like we just launched electric bases at the January trade show. That was a brand new thing for us. So that took years and multiple generations of testing and sampling and modifying and all that kind of good stuff. Whereas other stuff we do is a small take on what we already have. And so it's a very, very different process there.
Do me a favor, CNC, I know that's a machine.
Mm-hmm.
What does that stand for?
I've said it so long, it's computer aided. It's computer aided cutting. I forget what the actual initials stand for, but basically it's a router that's on a multiple axis table and allows us to cut everything from the exact neck pocket to where the bridge goes, where the pickups go, nice clean cuts, and it really gets rid of something that in the old days you would have issues with intonation and you'd have issues with consistency in those areas because somebody by hand was taking a measurement every time and deciding where to put the bridge, the neck, things that impact performance. And so at this point, we've got it all basically computer aided, and so it's drafted, it's tested, and then once we get it right, there's not much room for movement.
Thank you. Once you get an idea and that's been validated by the marketplace, that whatever number of people or whatever kind of validation, whether it's, give me 50% down from X number, whatever the process is, mm-hmm. What's the timing mm-hmm. and what does the launch process look like? Sure. Let's say we're just talking about not a brand new product, but a modification or a spin on something existing that you have.
Right. I'd say typically, most things do take between 6 months and a year before they reach the market from the point of, and I like your word, validation. So it's much longer. It's much more variation when you come to getting to that point. But when we've got the point where we've decided this is something we absolutely want to do, we have a general idea how we're going to do it, then we start to look at what do we want to make sure is right. So sampling, small production runs are very common for us. So after 6 months, what we might have is we might do a run of 6 or 12 of something. And really, that's not a matter of testing the market to put it out there for consumers, because that's being done in another way through the input we had in the first place. Really, that's us being able to see what problems did we not anticipate that might come up in production.
Right.
And we find that at 6 pieces as opposed to 60 or 600. And
so that's quality control basically for you guys, doing quality control at that point.
It really is. It's quality control, or we certainly have a very specific idea of what our guitars will look like and feel like, and how they feel to you when you touch them. And so sometimes these things it's much harder to explain, but we've definitely had situations where a product, we went through a sampling process, and when we had those 6 or 8 made in production, we went, this isn't a Michael Kelly. It's a nice guitar, but it isn't our guitar. And in some cases, we don't even know why. It's like just the folks who have been around our brand and involved, for so many years, we just look at each other and go, this isn't it. And either we tweak that, or in some cases we just move on to something else. But I think so that's a big part of it is some degree of production testing. And then the other part of the launch thing, since you asked about the launch aspect of it, is how we're going to launch. And so, if fair amount of stuff we would launch at like the January Anaheim, California NAMM show. Mm-hmm. That's a big global show. It's a great place to put out brand new product. Our distributors from around the world are there. Our dealers are there. A fair amount of consumers, come there. So, and a lot of press. So, we do some percentage of our new product there. So, that might either shorten or lengthen our launch schedule just by wanting to say this product should go into that grouping. And then, the other thing is where we're going to, if we're going to not do it, then when we're going to launch it, that certainly impacts the strategy as far as the timing. And then there's, multiple other ways that we've launched product and kind of, vary that by what we think is right for the product.
I really give you a lot of credit because this is, there's a lot of moving parts here. And when you have I guess for lack of a better word, a gestation period of 6 months to a year. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's a lot of money involved in that. That's not, it's not like going to Vegas and, hey, we just, we laid out 10 and we got 100 next month. There's a lot of planning. Yeah. There's a lot of support and there's a lot of work in there. And it is not an easy process.
Nope. Sometimes going to Vegas might have been a better idea.
I hear that, man. Your guitars are made in South Korea, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I should say at least a fair amount of them are. Not everyone, but yes. How
did that relationship evolve? Because I know most people that make guitars outside of the U.S., they're making them in like China or Indonesia or Pakistan. Mm-hmm. Now, I often read about back in the good old days when guitars were made in South Korea, and I always wonder, like, you'll read about old Epiphones that used to be made in South Korea, and I'm like, why did they move them? Because I've played some of the newer ones, and question mark.
Yeah. I mean, there's two sides of that. Certainly, the production costs are more expensive there than the other markets, and I think that's probably the answer why some others don't do it. But for us, what basically, part of our genesis story with Michael Kelly was the relationship we had in South Korea. We knew some makers there, and when we started small in the first place, we were able to start, with some folks that we really had a lot of belief in and how they could make the instruments and how they could listen to what we wanted and how we could teach them, and them being pliable and teachable. And so at that time, as you said, the good old days for other people, the current days for us, but, in those good old days, we made that commitment and felt like that was where our artist level, our touring grade products certainly needed to come from. And so, what's interesting about that, you mentioned some of the other markets, and we absolutely do have a handful of models that we make in China, a handful of models we make in Indonesia. And those markets actually do, have some really great production now and if you pick the right factory, the right product, the right scenarios. But for us, what you find that's unique about making a product, let's say in Europe or in the United States, and you see this a similarity in South Korea, is that it's craftsmen who stay on the job and at the same place doing the same instruments for a long period of time. So we literally in our factory have several people who have been with us and making our guitars for the entire 17 years.
Oh, wow.
And then as we come down, let's say lower rung of the staff, if you will, the average, time that they've been making our guitars is 3+ years. That, in most other markets over there, you would be hard pressed to find any factory where the turnover is not, with even more than 12 months that you could expect to have the same person making your instrument. And from a consistency perspective and just not making the same mistakes over and over again, this is an incredibly important part of it, not to mention the craftsmanship part of it. And so for us, we opted to, as the prices have gone up, we opted to, let our prices go up as much as they had to and try to be more efficient other ways to where that we can mitigate that to some degree. And we believe that that's a good signature, if you will, of what Michael Kelly is and whatnot. And then over the years, we've certainly added and worked very diligently. We've got a couple of instruments that we make now, electric guitars in Indonesia, and they're awesome. But they're the right instruments for how we're making them with the production team we have in that market, and we wouldn't move everything we have there and expect the same results. And similarly, the handful of things we make in China are things that fit what production we had available there and the skill set and the craftsmen that we could work with there.
Well, I don't think also, not everything comes down to price. I mean, it gets to a certain, you got to make money. You're not in business. This is not a 501c3, I don't think, right? You're not a charitable corporation, right?
No.
I mean, it just comes down to, if you'd like the guitar, great. If not, go. That's okay too. I mean, you cannot in anything. You can't make everybody happy all the time. That's just not real in any relationship.
Right.
So I mean, you have a beautiful looking guitar. And it's obviously you're a diligent guy, and I mean that costs money. You can't get a Ritz-Carlton experience on a Walmart budget. That's just not possible.
Exactly.
What's your background? Where are you? I know you're from Tampa here, right?
That's right. Yeah, originally born and raised in Tampa, so lived here in the Tampa Bay area for most of my life. I lived in Nashville for 3 years, and that was about it. So. Definitely a Floridian.
What are you doing in Nashville?
I work for Gibson Guitars up there.
Very cool. What is your background? Like, how'd you get involved with guitars? I mean, professionally or music-wise? Are you a guitar player?
Right. Actually, did a little bit of guitar playing. Probably a better drummer than I'm a guitar player. But I started like a lot of folks, just taking lessons as a kid at a music store, and just got interested in the equipment there. And so from as I got to know the owners of this store. They were. I was able to con them into hiring me, and so I was basically sweeping floors and whatnot, but was around the guitar and audio and drum areas, and really learning the aspects of those products and the musicians and what they were looking for and those kind of things, and so kind of going through from being a player to to being in retail. Really shaped a lot of my perspective and so forth. And then I was very fortunate to get at a pretty young age a really good gig with Gibson and learned a lot up there. And over the years, was able to be involved with Dean Guitars and resurrecting that brand at one point, BC Rich and a bunch of other brands. And so really it kind of transitioned. I'd definitely say I'm less of a musician and more someone who listens to musicians and learns from them. And tries to be inspired and understand what their wants are at this point.
Ironically, all the brands you're mentioning, like Dean and BC Rich, is a diametrically, I don't know for sure, but I would imagine the audience of the people who play them is like diametrically opposite to the people that play Michael Kelly guitars, right?
That's for sure. Yep.
Yeah, because your guitars look to me as more of a blues appeal or, pop, rock, funk, maybe even, but those
mainstream.
Guys, more mainstream, and those brands are tended to be more metal shredded sort of guys.
Yep.
So so you had positions, but what, like, you woke up one day and just said, "Hey, I'm going to start a guitar company." What was how did that happen?
Yeah, that's insanity, actually, when you put it that way. But, but basically, in my experience, both at Gibson and Dean especially, I made a couple of observations during those times, and they were both great companies. I was working with just awesome people. And a couple of observations I made is that the market had come to the point where the brands were completely attuned to high volume bestsellers. A lot of reasons for that, but it was how the distribution channel worked, and so they would have what they would consider low-hanging fruit product or uninteresting product, I guess I should say. That and they just didn't care about it. And I looked at the volume of that product, and it was actually pretty respectable. And at that time, the internet was kind of catching on. You could start to see e-commerce and eBay and things like that starting just to take hold. And I realized that, kind of the long tail was the book of the time, but the idea that, we were coming into a point in time where you could make more specialized product for a smaller group of people and do so successfully based on the changing economics. And I really didn't believe that those big companies would embrace that, and they didn't. And so what I really focused on was, could I build a brand that was niche focused? And that's why we started with our first two products were F-style mandolins and acoustic basses. And the reason is that those were two markets I had seen both of those companies sell what they would consider, a rounding error in their sales every year, and I thought was a pretty decent business. And I felt like if I actually cared about those spaces and put a lot of time and energy and made better product, more thoughtful product, more modernized product, and use the new marketing that was coming available to get the word out, that we could do something different that we frankly could not have done 10 years before that. And it would have been a stupid idea, in that prior time. And so that really is what motivated the Michael Kelly business, and still to this day, that's kind of why we consider ourselves a boutique brand, is that we do take the mindset as we're not seeking, that big volume, which frankly, is a double cut bolt-on $199 or less guitar. There, that is the holy grail that most brands aspire to, because they can sell millions of them. And that not at all does that interest us and my entire team. We all find that boring and that just we don't get tempted by that like others do.
So you basically saw an underserved, very specialized niche.
Yep.
That was profitable, and that you knew you can go in there and take better care of the customers, because the product wasn't a rounding error to you, but it was like, supper money. You went in there and treated it as such, and they responded.
Yep, exactly.
Okay, that's really clever. So what made you, I had an interview with last week, Walter Carter from Carter Vintage.
Right.
And we were talking. He goes, the dumbest thing you could do? I said, what's that, Walter? He said, be a guitar player and come to Nashville. Because there's just, it's like, being a high school baseball player here in Florida, right?
Right.
I mean, it's just like millions of them. And so I'm almost scared to ask you, then you said, okay, I'll make guitars now. What prompted that? Because that's where you're getting into the hair losing end of things.
I was young and stupid, so I would like to say, yeah, you're right. And I gave it a great deal of thought and consideration, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have done it if I would have had the depth of knowledge and understanding of all that was ahead of me. So it was really being a little naive, seeing, because with those other bigger companies, of course, you aren't having to deal with all the minutia and all the problems. You have people that do certain stuff. And of course, as a startup, that was not really the case. It was, we had to deal with everything.
Right. Talk about the name Michael Kelly, because it's kind of the elephant in the room.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. Well, with that experience I've had in the music industry, one thing I was lucky enough over the years to meet a bunch of the founders of companies that were namesakes, the Jim Marshalls and the Bill Ludwigs and the Hartley Peavies and, Les Paul and all these guys. And I always thought it was really special that the brands carried their name, and knowing those guys and watching how they acted towards their brands, there was definitely something to that they would protect those brands in a way that other people who I won't name, who bought brands later on and didn't have that, they seem to have a completely different attitude. And so I wanted to have a family name. Now, my name being Tracy Hoeft is not a good brand name at all. Neither part of that is. And so what I kind of racked my brain on what I could do. And at the time I had two young kids. One's name was Michael, one's name was Kelly. And so, that was where I felt like, I'm sure not going to trash the name of my kids. Right. So it had a lot of the same, responsibility to it that had I named it Tracy Hoeft and people not knowing what the heck that was or the same thing would have happened with that, and it has been the case. And my kids are a lot older now, and it's still it is very meaningful.
That's a good story. And I saw on your website both your kids do work with the company now.
They do, yeah. Actually, they're both at college at the moment. They're still our interns and summer help and assist us where they can, and hopefully we'll keep them involved.
Man, that's music to my ears that you said they're interns, because just as a side note, and you're a dad, I'm a dad, and I'm old school in that, I always believe that my kids need to have skin in the game and whatever they do. And It just irritates the crap out of me that I'm such a minority in that, everybody's busy buying their kids Land Rovers and BMWs, and that did not compute with me. I just didn't understand that. So I'm glad.
It doesn't end well. It doesn't usually end well
for anybody.
Yeah,
it's just stupid. Anyway, what were some of the biggest surprises that you discovered? Let's say when you first started making guitars, that the average guitar player would never know about.
I guess, and maybe this isn't exactly where you're going, but I guess it's just how darn hard it is. There is, literally about 100 different things we can do wrong on a guitar, and that's at the intellectual kind of actual level. And then you add to it, a couple of variables that nobody ever thinks about, and one is weather, and the other one is preference. And so, whenever we sell a guitar, whether that's to an end consumer or to a dealer, before it leaves, we have techs who go through and set it up and make sure it's playing well, and it leaves after multiple inspections, multiple people, in fact, inspecting it, playing great. Doesn't mean it's going to arrive playing great, because, it goes through, in some cases, thousands of feet of conveyor belts at a UPS or a FedEx depot. It sits in trucks, and it goes from 100-degree high humidity to, a dry mountain, cool climate. It's going to move. It's going to change. And so, that's certainly one of the things that I certainly wasn't smart enough at the time to realize that increased our degree of difficulty pretty massively. And in fact, for someone who really wants to make everybody happy, was one factor that kind of almost makes that impossible.
Yes.
And that's interesting. And then the other side of it, as I mentioned, is the preference side, is that, so often, whether that's the sound or the settings or the look of the finish or, how the action feels or, things of that nature, some people think that there's a right or a wrong. And it's kind of like, hearing a song and commenting it's a good song or a bad song. That's fair, but that's your opinion. There's no actual right way, to define a good or bad. And so it's a really interesting challenge that we deal with, and certainly something that both frustrates us and I guess you could say surprised me as from the early going.
I would imagine to some extent you have to, because if you're going to sit and think of from a preference standpoint, and you said you have like so many, 100 things, let's say, moving parts or things that can go wrong, it would you'd almost never get to build a guitar. You almost have to not think of that and just do what you do, because if you're going to be thinking of that, it's overwhelming, because it's like we said earlier, you cannot make everybody happy with everything,
right.
No matter what kind of guitar. I mean, even with a custom guitar, literally a custom guitar, there's always going to be something for the most part.
Yep.
What was if you're open to answering this, what were some of the bigger mistakes that you made along the way, and maybe a lesson that you learned from that over the last 17 years?
I think it's how I dealt with that combination of things. Is the mistake I made over time was trying to pull things one way or the other, trying to, on one hand, get it all perfect and wait till all the lights are green before I leave my house, and make, until you can make a guitar that's going to make everybody happy, you hold back, and that was not good. And then, of course, there's the other side, which is it's very easy to get lazy when you can't make everybody happy. And so I think for me, the life lesson we've learned, and I'd say this is for my team as well, is that, we had to find a balance. And, we're extremely driven by the desire to get those emails that we thankfully get every day from just ecstatic folks and hearing their stories of how they've enjoyed the instruments and how they've been inspired and so forth. But, you can't be cowed in fear of the fact that some folks aren't going to have that experience.
I think that's a really good lesson. Have you been able to, like, I know I've learned a lot of lessons from my business and from just different, even from playing guitar actually, that have not only helped me in that particular aspect, but in other aspects of life. Do you feel that, because I think that's a really valuable life lesson in a sense of, I just going to do the best I can do and not take on the responsibility of everybody's reaction to that.
Right.
Has that served you in other areas?
I think so. Certainly in parenting.
Oh, God.
It's a good experience to have there. And but yeah, I think in relationships, especially,
yes,
in general, and other business endeavors and so forth. I do think that's a pretty good thing to have, and certainly I'm sure I have a long ways to go and potential improvement there.
So, and thank you for being so open and honest about that. That was really good. The flip side, what are one or two things that you did at the time that were out of your comfort zone, but it turned out to be really good decisions?
Really good decisions,
or big breakthroughs, or just like, shit, it worked. Yes.
Right. Right. Yeah. I think that for me, it's been when we've managed to, as I said, we're so used to being customer driven. And, I think it was Henry Ford that said, if he would have asked his customers what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. and so being customer driven, we've definitely had a few cases where we've had to, go out on a limb and go against the feedback we were hearing, and or into a competitive market that others might tell us that we just shouldn't be in. And so I think that for us, that's been where the experience has helped us. But then getting out of that logic and that comfort zone and going ahead and taking a few risks, and they are few. It's definitely not the majority of what we do. I think that has been a part of what's made us work.
Thanks. That's really good, and I'm happy for you guys. What you mentioned, there's 100 things that can go wrong with your guitar. If what would you say though, of all the stuff involved in going on with the guitar, what are the primary 2-3 parts, whatever that number is, that really impact the sound and the tone of a guitar most?
Mm-hmm. I believe if we're talking electric guitar, without a doubt, you're talking about the pickups and you're talking about the body, and and the body wood specifically, and so those two things with the electronics and how you wire it all and get those sounds. I think in the guitar itself, those two things will affect what you can get as an output on the guitar, and of course, then you run it into effects in an amp, and those are major factors as well. I think there's a lot of little stuff, if you will, what fingerboard wood you have and what strings you're using and so on and so forth. There's small stuff that has an impact, but without a doubt, that's the big one. And on acoustic guitars, it's really that top wood and then if you're dealing with electronics and the bracing. So in each case, depending on which instrument type you're talking about, there's a couple of things. They're all kind of revolve around that body wood and then we're applicable electronics.
Yeah, I was always wondering about that because I think people go in looking for, I see people spending a ton of time on, I don't really have a lot of time to go on social media, but when I'm on there, I take a look, and people spend hours and hours talking about the whammy bar and
right.
And I'm like, man, does that really, I don't really know how important that is to your sound, but what do I know?
I can tell you one thing: the name on the headstock doesn't make it sound any better. So that's probably the misconception that unfortunately a fair amount of people get hung up in. But that one best I could. We've not found a decal or or anything like that improves tone.
That's your new marketing campaign right there.
Yeah,
the name of the guitar doesn't make it sound better.
That's right.
Your aesthetics of your guitars, they're really nice looking. I mean, I like really clean lines, and they're very nice looking. Do you have a team in-house that does this, or are you responsible for this? Or does the manufacturer? How did that evolve? I mean, the look.
The visual design, the aesthetic is probably the one area that's mostly me. And it's just because from the very beginning that has been inspired by just what I felt like was an attractive instrument and what brought forward each of the models that we were looking at. We have a great team that absolutely contributes to every model we make, but they really dig into the electronics and the specs as you get into more detail. But what is the Michael Kelly look and visual aesthetic is certainly something that I take a lot of pride and focus on, and felt like it was one of the ways as a small company we could have an advantage, because frankly, big companies, you have 1,000 stakeholders and every guitar looks radically different because it looks like they're, this guy who made it or who inspired that one and that guy. And we wanted something that when someone looked at it, they would recognize it as a Michael Kelly with some similarity. And I didn't know how to do that other than, to have that kind of central influence.
Yeah, well, you did an excellent job. And what I really like is your models are distinctly different, but yet they retain. You could tell they have the same dad. But yet they're all different looking. So it's pretty. I'm not a design guy, so I always find that really impressive that to do that and carry that forward. It's not an easy thing, I don't think.
Well, thank you.
What do you? I think I read something about you just released a special edition guitar, or is it that, or what are you working on now that you're most excited about?
We just launched what we call the Enlighten collection, and that's definitely one of the main things I'm excited about. This was a first for us. It was we kept hearing over the years in that customer feedback loop that we talk about. We kept hearing from people who, for various reasons, needed a lighter weight electric guitar. In a lot of cases, it was not, hey, I prefer something, but it was literally back issues, shoulder issues, arm issues, aging, things of that nature, and they needed a lighter weight guitar, and they needed one that didn't cost them an arm and a leg. Sorry about that one, but and then from was more traditional and wasn't something that they were giving up a lot performance wise. So we spent a lot of time on this, definitely longer than the usual 1 year that we talked about earlier. And we worked on just every detail from what wood we could use that would give us the sound we want, the resonance we want, but still a lower mass, how we could lower the mass even further, developing aluminum parts instead of steel, dozens of little things that helped us get the guitars below 6 pounds. And then we did a Kickstarter campaign to launch it. And that was a lot of fun. That was definitely a first and for us. And that gave us a whole new level of consumer feedback and frankly, a group of people who really bought into it and supported it, which was so exciting. Those we actually delivered to our Kickstarter folks last month, and so that was great fun, and started to offer those to other folks by the end of last month. And so that's definitely one of the products that we're most excited about. That's the newest, greatest thing for us.
So, and that's called the Enlighten line.
Enlightened, yeah, Enlightened collection.
Well, that's great, man. Congratulations on the Kickstarter campaign. The good thing about that is, I know I've read a number of different articles about Kickstarter. You do a successful campaign on there. Round 2 is much easier.
Right, absolutely.
And it gives you a whole new pool of people to discover. Talk about lead acquisition cost. It mitigates that, I think, quite a bit, and it gives you a whole new line of support that you wouldn't have had otherwise, which is great.
Right.
Congratulations.
Although, Craig, the downside is it will be easier to launch, but it'll be hard. I still have to figure out what product to put in there, and that's a pretty high bar, because it's definitely not something we wouldn't do just a new color or something like that. So it's going to have to be something pretty distinctive, like the Enlightened was. So stay tuned, but nothing imminent planned there.
This may sound crazy. What do you think about? Do you think there's? I'm 53. I don't know how old you are, but when I was a kid, I grew up in the 70s mostly. And I would see these guys like 135 pounds soaking wet, and they'd be toting around this big ass heavy, 12-pound Les Paul.
Yep.
And for the life of me, I never knew how that was possible. I said, man, that just can't be the drugs kicking in. I'm wondering, is there a bunch of people out there that want heavy guitars back to the old days?
Yep.
I mean, that because people bought them,
Absolutely. And for sure, we still hear from people who want a heavier guitar. And we don't address that because, frankly, the big brands make plenty of really heavy guitars. And so not a problem to solve, if you will, but absolutely there's a demand for it. And then again, a lot of our enlightened customers are those same guys you just described, and those years of toting around a 12-pound guitar have not been good to them. Yeah. So it kind of goes a couple different ways.
Well, good. Congratulations on that campaign, though. That's really exciting. We're going to do a little segment here called Inside the Music Studio, asking you some personal questions if you're good with that.
Great. Okay.
All righty. If you weren't doing what you're doing now, what would you be doing instead?
I so much enjoy building stuff in business. I'm sure it would be, something else in the entrepreneurial space. Hopefully, in a product that would not have as many things go wrong, wouldn't be subject to weather and preferences much.
I hear you. But you'd be creating something.
I think so. Yeah.
Most important person in your life?
I have to say that's my wife, and both in the obvious reasons, but since we're on a business track as well in this conversation, is that you can't get to do what I've done and the risk that there is in entrepreneurship and guitar business and all the other stuff without a really supportive wife and and just a super family. So she's definitely allowed me to do a lot of things that I do enjoy doing.
That's awesome. How long have you guys been married?
Oh, you're going to get me in trouble now.
I didn't write that question down.
Yeah, exactly. But over 30 years.
Hey, so. That's awesome, man. Congratulations. That's really nice. That's really good, man. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
That's unusual. I mean, we've been together 25, but that's really unusual. So you don't hear that often nowadays.
Hang on 1 second.
No worries, man.
All right, go ahead. Sorry.
No worries. Any hobbies? What are your hobbies outside of music and outside of work, if you have time for any?
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot of time for other stuff, but I still do play. I enjoy playing, drums mostly, and then my kids and just doing stuff with them is anything we possibly can find to do together. Those are probably what I do with most of my spare time.
Sure, I hear you. Do you travel to South Korea often?
I do go to Asia, at least a couple times a year, and also Europe and a few other places where we have business.
What's the favorite place you've traveled?
Czech Republic.
Really? That's interesting. Why?
Prague is just a great city. Being born and raised here in Florida, we don't have as much history as, let's say, the Northeast in the United States and so forth. So maybe it's just what I was raised around. But you go to these places where you've got this really old group of buildings still, and just an interesting culture, and just so dramatically different food and everything else. And so it's a place I used to go on business. And it's probably one of the few places that I ever went on business that I then said I have to go back, and did go back, for vacation time, and just really enjoyed it and looking forward to going back again.
That's very cool. Yeah, my wife is from Europe. She's from the UK, and the church where she was christened, I think, was from 600, the year 600. Yeah.
Crazy, right?
It's just like, and there's a bunch of churches in her town like that. She's from a little town, and they're all, you couldn't bulldoze those things. They're built so well, but it's, yeah, I understand what you're saying. That's interesting. Prague. I've never been there. What's your favorite part of your job?
I think it's really the interactions we get to have with musicians. I mean, it's really a lot of fun. The guys we get to talk to, phone and email and whatnot, and sometimes they're famous guys or established touring artists, but just a lot of great people. And so, getting to do that is really neat. When do some events around the country when we can and so forth, and get to see some people in person, and that's probably what keeps us all going, honestly.
Can you share some names of some of the guys that are maybe well known playing Michael Kelly guitars?
Really, from a well-known, we've taken a different tact on Michael Kelly. So a lot of the well-known guys I know and have been friends with have been from some of his other experiences. But the guys who have been touring with Michael Kelly are more, let's just say, they're the backing act, if you will, or the hired gun type
Sure.
of guy. And to me, that's a lot of fun. Is those guys are actually out there doing it, and they're fantastic musicians and don't get the accolades, but they're really the backbone of so much of what music is.
Yeah, I've interviewed a lot of guys like that out of Nashville, actually, so I know exactly what you're talking about. They're hired guns, and they work their butts off, and if it wasn't for them, the stuff wouldn't be happening. But yeah, I know exactly those guys. Is there a least favorite part of your job?
Sure. As much as, like I said earlier, we've come to realize that people are going to be unhappy no matter what we do. Just because their preferences are not where the instrument's going to end up for whatever reason, sonically or otherwise. And, there's no doubt that you come in and you have that unhappy situation. And with our mindset the way it is, we aren't really, myself or the other members of the team, we're not really good at just brushing that off.
Yeah.
And, and dusting it off and moving on. And so, that's definitely, if we had a way to make everybody happy all the time, that's what we prefer to do, and that gets a little grating sometimes when we can't.
Well, hey, listen, you got pride of ownership in what you do, and that's like really important, and not a very that's not a commodity nowadays.
Right.
I think that's so that's a good thing. One more question I'm going to ask you, and then I'm going to let you go because I appreciate your time. If you can go back in time and do one thing differently, either in business or your personal life, what would that one thing be?
Wow, that's a tough one, dude. Just one thing.
Well, you could 2, 3, 4 things if you got a bunch of things.
Yeah, right. It's funny, I guess if I had that opportunity, if I had a button to push, I do wonder would I come back and do guitars again, because what I talked about. I mean,
sure.
It's that love and frustration of it. But I think that would be one thing. But most of the stuff that I've done, I guess just my attitude, the way it is, I don't tend to look back very often, and I tend to see the good of what the way we've gone down the path. So nothing else really stands out.
You know what? I'm the same way. I mean, everybody has bad things happen to them, but you have to. That's just part of the journey, man, because you can't say, well, if this happened, then what would the impact of that have been? So you never know. It's easy to say, well, if this didn't happen, man, you might be dead. Who the hell knows, right?
Right, exactly.
I mean, I'll take what I got. Anyway, listen, Tracy Hoeft, I cannot thank you enough for your time, man. You've been very generous. Is there anything you'd like to promote or anything else you're working on right now that you want to let people know about? I want to tell everybody to check out Michael Kelly Guitars at michaelkellyguitars.com. But Tracy, anything else going on?
No, I think that you just hit on what I was going to say, which is, I'd love for everybody to, get a chance to get a look at our instruments on our site. And, as we said, we're really connected. And so reach out and talk to myself or one of the members of the team. All of us take care of the emails and whatnot. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to get the opportunity to get a great instrument to you.
Yeah, and I just want to say I've had conversations back and forth with Tracy, and he's a very genuine guy. When's the last time the owner of a guitar company said, hey, I'd love to hear from you? And just in certain business conversations we've had, and I'm not blowing smoke up his rear end because that's not me, but he's a really, really serious guy. Like, he really takes, we had a conversation earlier. I said, how you do one thing is how you do everything. The same sense of pride of ownership he puts into his guitars, he puts into everything. I mean, even doing this interview, it was like, he was very meticulous about things, and it was important to him that he wanted to speak and say his truth. So if you're looking to work with a company that really actually cares about you, and go to the website, you'll see all the people on there. I looked at all the videos and the pictures and everything. It's really cool. So Tracy, I appreciate your time, and everybody,
Thank you,
you're welcome, man. It was great having you. We'll hope to have you again in a couple of years and see how the company's grown. And
Sounds
everybody, hope you enjoyed the interview. Please leave us your feedback, and we will see you on the next time. Have fun playing guitar, everybody. Hey, thanks very much for listening. You can sign up to get notified of future episodes on our website at everyonelovesguitar.com. Now go play your guitar and have fun. Till next time, I'm out. Peace. We hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, subscribe to the Everyone Loves Guitar podcast, and you can do this online at everyonelovesguitar.com or on iTunes. And if you like the show, please leave us a 5-star positive review. The more 5-star reviews we get, the higher our show ranks, and higher rankings mean we get to continue speaking with cool, interesting guests on our show. We'll see you on the next episode, and until then, keep playing your guitar and have fun making music.